So I'd like to welcome our first candidate, Michael Bellotti. Michael Bellotti is a longtime member of our Quincy Ward 6 Democratic City Committee, as well as the former sheriff for Norfolk County. He is currently running for Norfolk County Treasurer. I welcome you. You have the floor. Please introduce yourself, why you'd like this job, and why you would, then we will open the floor to questions. Thank you, Michael.
First of all, I want to thank Lisa, you and all the other members of the Democratic City Committee in Quincy for all the fine work you've done over the years and the challenges you've met during this COVID pandemic or virus. And it hasn't been easy, but in some ways, there have been more opportunities, I think, for candidates because of a new sophistication with technology. So it's a great opportunity. So first of all, I'm Michael G. Bellotti, grew up in Quincy, lifelong Democrat. I was state committee man for the first Norfolk, or for the Mike Morrissey Senate District and now John Keenan Senate District several years ago. I've had the good fortune to work at many levels with the Democratic Party, state, local, and of course, state committee man. I met a lot of great people over the years. Those are the values I brought to the sheriff's office, but prior to that, I was a state legislator for Quincy and Randolph for 6 years. I got elected in 1992 and sworn in 1993. And then I got elected in 1998 and sworn in to sheriff as 1999. So obviously the type of values that I learned from growing up in a Democratic family, being from Quincy, working with great legends like folks on tonight, and folks who are no longer with us like John Gillis, folks like Joe Shea, who is with us and doing a great job, who have led the way. And even before that, people like Arthur Tobin and other folks who we forget that, several years ago, this county was really a Republican county, but it's really become more and more a Democratic county over the past few decades. And it's a real opportunity, but it's also a delight to run as a Democrat in Quincy, but Norfolk County. So sheriff was a very, I guess, a big challenge for me when I first got elected in 1999. I was 34 years old. And I'm coming out of the legislature. I was a small business owner, had to have a degree from Boston College in liberal arts, and have a law degree from New England School of Law. And I think some of the greatest challenge immediately was the management component and the budgetary aspects. But creating those initiatives, probably after the first 6 to 12 months, and having the ability to kind of set things straight there, because there was a budget deficit, and we did unfortunately have to, through attrition and other means, lessen the full-time staff, the FTEs, full-time employees, and then work in ways to shift the paradigm from really what was at that time, innovative things were going on, but as the world changed, we had to become even more innovative how we dealt with offenders, inmates. Not that they were necessarily warehoused in the old days, but more and more we have shifted our resources from security to reentry, rehabilitation, programs that work, but mostly with nonprofits and partners and other agencies throughout Norfolk County and the state. And we did that without any new additional funds to the budget. We just found ways to innovatively create programs and also initiatives that just went around the inmates, but were around senior program, youth programs, law enforcement, working with the police chiefs and fire chiefs. And I think we were able to do that because I did try to set a tone very early on. Unlike a few, not all sheriffs, that I was only going to provide the services that the towns in their agencies and components and department heads in the fire and the police wanted me to work with them with. And when I brought that attitude to police chiefs and fire chiefs and superintendents, senior programs or council on agings, more and more they accepted our role. The role of sheriff expanded greatly in the past 2 decades I was there. And I did it incrementally, and I did it with the support and the trust of just about every stakeholder, private sector, public safety in the county. It's a $35 million budget, or was when I left. Every year we manage about $650,000 at least in grants. There were 3 collective bargaining units, and I had the really the opportunity and the challenge and really enjoyed working with the unions. We didn't always agree. I mean, I implemented a sick time policy before I left that cut sick time by over 20%. And they weren't always open to my ideas, but we were open to working together, and sometimes outside of the contract, or we had to read a lot into the spirit of the contract. And we did that by, admitting our mistakes as management. I mean, managers make mistakes, we know that. And then it's a whole different situation to be a manager. In some ways, you don't have the union protection, but, you're not as, you're up for more criticism if you approach it incorrectly. You have to be humble, you have to be creative, and you have to look them in the eye and talk to them about shared solutions and shared values. So of those 3 collective bargaining units, I've received the endorsement of all of them in the past several weeks. We only had 3 grievances my last 2 years and won them all. I always try to work out the grievances before it got to legal fees in a, some type of black and white resolution that made nobody happy. I also instituted an energy management project with solar panels before I left through through outside state funding. So we're saving dollars. It's a very, I guess, progressive for the sheriff's office to really think of us as green and to make that an important component of how we operate. It wasn't cheap. We did it with DCAM, but we also did it with the leadership in the jail, with correction officers, support service, and management. The sheriff's office, while I was there, was accredited by the American Corrections Association 7 times. We were also duly accredited by the National Commission on Correctional Health Care 7 times. When I first got there, we were probably one of only 50 jails in the country that were duly accredited. I really believe that it's important to have high standards so that, management and labor can, look at a shared kind of plan and understand that it's not just about really fighting and making it up as we go, but best practices. And having outside folks come in and look at us every 3 years forced us to work together on policy, on best practices. And we really never, we got sued, but we never lost lawsuits. In one of the safest jails in the country, medical units are always being sued, and inmates do win traditionally. But in the sheriff's office, we never lost a lawsuit, and they never got too far because of those set goals and the mutual understanding of everyone in the organization. In terms of recidivism, I was the first sheriff in Norfolk County and probably the second or third in the state to partner with not just many partners on education and housing and veterans issues, but particularly and primarily with recovery homes. So I took about $400,000 a year and shifted it from the housing of inmates in bought or rented homes in recovery home beds. In recovery homes with the Garvin Foundation, with a lot of different with the North Cottage, which has a great program, and we were able to give offenders a chance to learn some of those reentry skills and still deal with their addictions, because over 80% do have some type of addiction, and to put them in the community, still under my jurisdiction or the sheriff's office jurisdiction, and make sure that they earned it, but they incrementally, figured out how to live in the real world once again. And the biggest component was addiction and substance abuse. Really equally big to that in terms of component, in terms of the success rate and recidivism rates of how best you can determine if an offender will make it, is education. We had one of the highest GED rates, passage rates in the state. We focused on education also. So you had an offender who could never really fill out an application for even like a Home Depot or a job like that without saying that they had a high school, didn't have a high school degree. So we were able to work a lot of pride around that with the offenders. We had many different partnerships over the years with Quincy College, adult-based education programs that would continue seamlessly once they left the jail if they did not accomplish their GED. Northeastern University was invited in. We paid a few dollars and had them look at us for 3 or 4 years. And when I was leaving, I was making sure that they still were kind of monitoring and statistically and analyzing the success rates of our programs. What they told us was over 80% of our offenders touched or went through or finished a rehabilitation program on education, again, mental health, substance abuse, and all those areas that lead to recidivism. They also told us through this study that we had a higher rate of, we had a greater success when it comes to recidivism than the national average and the state average. And I think that's because the staff bought into it. And finally, in terms of outside programs, I created through a federal grant my first few years there, the most extensive youth program. But, I could call it an at-risk youth program, but it affects all kids. All kids are at risk these days. It targeted 10 to 14-year-olds and allowed them to learn from our counselors, many who had at least 1 year of college and had an inclination to work with students or kids later in life. We taught them how to make decisions and how to learn a little bit, how to be on their own a bit in the community, because 10 to 14, the parents give them more freedom and they're more out there with peer pressure. And I have, received all kinds of feedback from parents, particularly parents whose children might have been a little bit not on the perfect track and build confidence. I mean, it's all about team building. It's not just about climbing 40 feet in a ropes course. It's about building confidence and having pride and working together as a team. Also, our senior programs, I created the Are You OK program. We had Project Lifesaver, which I was the first sheriff to bring to the state. Many sheriffs picked it up, and now many police chiefs have taken it over, so that seniors who may wander from their homes for whatever reason, Alzheimer's, dementia, we could track them down within 20 minutes on the average, and it saved lives. So I would bring these programs. I try to help the cities and towns not replicate every program that their neighbors might have, but to create a centralized resource that they could take advantage of. Some cities and towns used all of our programs. Some used a few, but it was like a menu. They could do it. But mainly the focus was on inmates, and it was on making sure that folks knew that the sheriff's office could impact their lives. So in closing, some of the things I do as treasurer is take the same approach. I've worked with all these stakeholders. I understand the best approach to get other stakeholders to buy in. And we would initiate senior and youth programs, programs that affect all residents of all ages, student aid, loan, education courses. We know, and maybe I'm guilty of it too, a lot of parents, because they want to give their children sometimes what they didn't have in terms of that ideal college education, will bite off more than they or their children can chew when it comes to school loans. So we want to educate that, first-time home buyer programs. Also, probably most importantly, there's so many scams now with senior citizens, and we understand, we hear about them, the way they'll call up and pretend that they're the grandson or granddaughter, and they'll get them to wire money, or over the internet, the romance scams, or people that fraudulently exploit them financially because they're either a family member or a healthcare provider in the house. So we're going to grow those programs. But most importantly, I think we're going to protect the county pension system. I have a unique perspective because I basically worked in the public pension system, which we know impacts lives. 90% of the folks that retire from the Norfolk County system are what you call superannuation or regular pensioners. Others are disability or accidental disability. And one of the issues I worked on as sheriff was workers' comp. We got to make sure workers' comp is there for the employees when they need it. We also got to make sure that there isn't any fraud in that, because that will create a greater pension liability when you have too many who are fraudulently exploiting the system. So there is a balance there. I've been there. I understand budgets. I understand HR issues. And in terms of the pension system, work closely with the board. Obviously, as if I was fortunate to be elected as a new treasurer, I would make sure that, I went in there with fresh eyes. I have a great deal of respect for the board and for those offices. And I don't think there's any reason to think that they're not doing the greatest job possible. But it's incumbent on any new treasurer to do an audit, to have transparency, and make sure that we understand that the retirees and the active members are our constituents. There is so much more we can do. I would say teletown hall events so that all our constituencies or members, the 8,000 active and retired members of the system, Norfolk County retirement system, could sit with folks like me in the board and our consultants around financial issues and talk about that. And talk about not just how we invest money, is it our value system, but also about the fears they have about the complexity of Chapter 32. Chapter 32 sounds pretty simple because it lays out our pension system. But it isn't. It's complex when you think about how it is practically applied. So a lot of folks don't think about retirement until the last several months, and they need to be educated about their options because they learn, unfortunately, during the process when they already made a commitment or almost after the fact that they didn't really understand or had a perception that wasn't true based on the law. Plus, we know that they changed the laws about 10 years ago, and that impacts employees. You can have two employees working side by side with different benefits in different retirement opportunities. So it is legal. I did, go to law school. I understand, legal precedent, regulations, and policies. Most importantly, I understand how, by being the sheriff, how those Chapter 32, the pension laws, impact and create anxiety of folks, and particularly around disability and accidental disability. So there's much I'd like to do as treasurer, but I understand that it is about the pensioners, it's about the pension fund and balancing the interests of the taxpayers and those contributing employees in the towns and different agencies who are one of the unit members and one of the 42 unit members. So I think at this time I will open it up to any questions you folks have, because I think I'm probably beyond 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bellotti. Do we have any questions from the participants tonight? Okay, Chair Alicia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. What's interesting about this particular year's races, Mr. Bellotti, is that many of our candidates have been from Norfolk County. You listening to me, Michael?
Yeah, repeat that again. my computer. Repeat that again, Alicia.
Many of the candidates that we have met over the last 2 months have been candidates for Norfolk County positions.
Right.
Many of the residents in Norfolk County, with all due respect, know the least about county elected officials and what their jobs are. I want you to clearly explain, and I think you did a good job in saying, what are the responsibilities of the treasurer?
Right.
And you said that you need to balance the taxpayers' interests. And what do you mean by that? What you're I'm here in full disclosure as a county employee of Norfolk, as well as a taxpayer. So what do you mean by that?
All I'm saying is that there is a unfunded liability of 68% in Norfolk County, and the board has taken very aggressive steps to fully fund that by 2029. Statutorily, Mass General laws allow up to 2040, and we know full funding is a priority. And that liability, and even on the state level, in some ways can impact the average taxpayers in terms of will it, hopefully aggressively fully funding it. And a lot of the cities and towns contribute to that, as we know, they're assessed. So those are taxpayers' money. So you have the interest of the taxpayers, but you have to balance that with the interest of the folks in the pension system. It's a defined benefit plan, which means they're guaranteed a pension, right? It's not a defined contribution plan, which means it would have to be fully funded regardless, because we are part of the government, county and state in some ways, and the towns are reimbursing that to a certain degree. That's where the responsibility comes. But on the other hand, we have to make sure that the pension system works for the retirees. I mean, in Norfolk County, I believe that the COLA is on 18%, or the first $18,000, I'm sorry. In a lot of other towns and state level, it's anywhere from 12 to 16 or 17. But we have the highest allowable amount at $18,000, which is good. That means every year our retirees are receiving upwards of 3%. This year I think it was 1.2 or 1.6. I'm not remembering, but 1.6%, I believe, is what the county decided to give them the retirement board because of the pandemic. But so that's the balancing interest. We want to make sure that we give them the fullest benefits that they deserve. And it's sad because that 3% on the average pension isn't $12,000 or $18,000 in the case of Norfolk County. It's higher than that. So they're losing on inflation. So after 10 or 15 years, if somebody has a certain amount in their pension, they've lost upwards to 20% of the value through inflation. And we're all living longer, and some folks retiring younger, particularly Group 4, and we want to make sure that we do everything possible that we can afford so that they're not losing their pension to inflation. In these very difficult economic times, in light of the national deficit, in how we had to go to the financial world through Congress and the president in the last several weeks, and may have to do that again, particularly about unemployment. That's probably going to affect inflation, which means, again, we're going to end up diminishing the value of somebody who's been out of the job, isn't active, but is retired for the past several years. So that's the balancing interest. And
Thank you.
the state's dealing with it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I just have one other question, more of a comment. In regards to the deferred comp plan, I believe it's still called the SMART plan, I forget. I have to say, that is not a widely understood program amongst the employees of Norfolk County. And as treasurer, if you could do anything to let more of the employees know of Norfolk County, that's available to them. In the private sector, the deferred comp plan is like the 401k for the private sector. You can put in your own funds and it's matched to a certain degree, and that's above and beyond the amount you will get when you retire above your pension. I only knew about it because I had been in the state system and I continued on the county level. And that was promoted on the state level to let employees know that that's available to them. Because that's really all the private sector has now is their 401ks. There's no such thing as pension systems in a lot of the private sector anymore. So I'm just would have you consider recognizing that needs to be, you need to let employees know that that's available to them.
It's funny, my daughter works for the state. She works in the state house of Senator Mike Rush, and I've been impressed upon her. She's 25 years old. I mean, good luck trying to get her to take part of her, they don't make a lot of money in the state house, and to think that far ahead in terms of putting really, hopefully the maximum amount in terms of tax benefits into deferred comp. But boy, does that add up. Anybody we know that did it and did it right from a young age, they're sitting on $1 million. A lot of folks, because they think their pension is going to carry them when they retire, and they're going to be sadly mistaken because housing costs, the baby boomers have completely, and I'm a baby boomer, 1963, I think I'm the last, overextended themselves because, again, they were trying to give their kids something they maybe thought they didn't have in terms of education, picking up the car loan, picking up the phone bill. And there have been studies out there that say a lot of baby boomers, and I know, they're definitely beyond retirement age in terms of a big segment of them, are going to have to figure out in a very, very, kind of scary way how they're going to survive. The kids are all set. They may end up in this is not really a wild fetched idea, may end up living with their kids and an in-law, a lot of them, because they didn't properly plan for the future. And I think that's a lot of folks, particularly folks that in the private sector that thought there was going to be a pension 20 years ago, now they're not there, and in the public sector who aren't taking into account that we could have hyperinflation someday, in that the value of the dollar decreases and everything around us is going up. And it's a very uncertain world. And although the market is strong and no one really knows why, because we know it's not going to remain that way. I mean, it just can't. I mean, I want to pray it does, but you have
I really want to, I don't mean to interrupt you, Michael, but I don't want to hog the stage in these questions either. And I'm hoping there are other members of the committee that like to speak to you or address questions to you at this time, because we just have under 6 minutes left.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
No worries, no worries. Thank you.
So Alicia, yes, I'm actually going to take advantage of having the mic. So you've addressed this a little bit, but we're seeing, so I'm Melissa Shapiro from Ward 3 in Quincy. We're seeing a huge economic impact of COVID, which will likely have a huge impact on state, county, and municipal budgets. How will you respond to potential shortfalls in your role if elected?
Yeah, well, obviously the first component is to really make sure that the best folks are consulting on the pension, in other words, the best systems. So that's the first point. That is the most important component. But what I think I bring to the table is 20 years of working twice in economic downturns, working with budgets that were malleable, that had to be cut halfway through the year, in working with the State House as a state legislator, being able to pick up the phone and talk to stakeholders. This is clearly a financial issue and crisis, but there's going to be, throughout the country, throughout the state, throughout Norfolk County, throughout all the municipalities, there's going to have to be some political will and resolution. And I like to think that if you look at my years in government, I've been able to work with every party, the legislature. There might have to be laws changed that increase the role, I believe, for county government. We don't get the full benefit of being a regional resource to other communities. We do a great job around, RSVP, different programs, using the engineering department, but there are so many more areas, and that is going to lead to savings in the end. But I think, I bring a skill set that can bring people together, work on every level, and hopefully lead in a way, because as treasurer, you touch every other elected office or department in the county. And I'm very familiar with them. And you have to kind of check your ego at the door and find ways to help them.
All right, great. And we also have a question from another member that I am bringing up as soon as I can get their name up here. So this is Corey Knowles with a question.
Hello. You seem to imply in your opening statements that you knew that moving money to different parts of the budget, such as when you moved as sheriff money to help house former inmates or something along those lines, that control over the purse strings can allow for essentially policy initiatives under a different name than policy initiatives. Do you have plans for such things if you are elected county treasurer?
Yeah, I mean, looking at student aid in loan, educational, in seminars, education course seminars, reaching out to kids, working in the schools. I did that with my youth camp, and I did that with a lot of other programs tailored for particular communities. So getting into schools young, and it's not part of the curriculum in high school, and it should be. That could be working with the legislature. There's been bills filed annually or biannually. In my experience legislative, I mean, I think that should be in light of this looming financial crisis in the way that we're just heaping more and more debt on each family. Working on scam prevention with seniors, which I did as sheriff, bringing in guest speakers from the AG's office, DA's office, IRS, those areas where the scams occur. Office hours, which really won't cost any money throughout all 28 communities. The teletown hall events, working to make sure that even though I have firm ideas about what we can do with those communities, but having an open ear to them. I created the IUOK program, which calls seniors to make sure that they're safe every day. And then that was around the triad program. So there's a triad program that's in a lot of different municipalities, which the treasurer isn't represented, and I will be representing myself and designees around the county. So that is not a money issue. That's not going to cost anything. So I'm going to make sure that the retirees feel safe, but in terms of retirees, they're now getting used to healthcare through telecommunication, or telemedicine. We can do more on the county level to ease some of their fears and educate them. A lot of educational programs, because we have a captive audience, and they already hopefully trust us based on the performance of the pension board. Did I answer that right? Was that the question?
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
We have exactly 2 minutes left. Do we have a quick question for Michael before he wraps up? You have 2 minutes to tell us why we should vote for you for county treasurer.
I bring a lot of different experience. It's going to be a very difficult time in government, and we want county government to survive. And that is always questionable, as we know. People ask why we have county government. So we need somebody who can defend it, who can proactively explain to the average voter why it's important, whether it's the Aggie school, the golf course, which could probably do greater revenues. That might be something to look at. And all the other services and programs that the county brings. And I would begin the job on the first day, clearly working on the financial component, but most importantly, comfortable with the advisory board, selectmen, city councils, mayors, in finding out a way that we can make county government even more impactful. And if you look at my record as sheriff, I hope you see that. I mean, that office was transformed around reentry and programs. nobody asked really what the sheriff does for me when I took over. They know. I mean, Alicia, Andrea had, your father was once on our Are You OK program, and little Roger was on our wandering program because of autism. Before I became sheriff, think about it, 2 programs touched your family that didn't exist. That's the impact the sheriffs are. And I'm sure Julia went to the camp. So, people know what the sheriff's office does because it impacts them. And it brings them into greater confidence for our core mission, which was inmate reentry and rehabilitation. So you grab them by initiatives, but you never forget your core mission. Okay?
Unmute myself again, Michael, because I didn't want to interrupt you at any point in time. That was fantastic. And believe it or not, our half hour is already up. But we sincerely appreciate all your time and effort. And what do we have left? 3 weeks to primary day?
Yep. So if you need to get in touch with me,
3 weeks today? Yeah.
Bellotti for Treasurer, that's a 4. Bellotti for Treasurer at Gmail is my email. And Bellotti for Treasurer for Facebook and Instagram, you can find it. That's all. Thank you.